So I was debating on whether I should read something or tell a story. And I kind of feel like, can you guys help me decide? You want me to tell your story? Do you want me to? It will be very short, actually. I can tell you about my names. Okay. All right. So I'll tell you about my names, right? So Julia, Nekessa, Opoti, which I actually mispronounce my names because I speak English. I mean, English is my first language. But my middle name is supposed to be Nekessa, and my last name is Opoti, but I'm not used to pronouncing it that way. Um, and I have other names. My other name is Zora, which I don't use, but they're all on my birth certificate. And I didn't use Nekessa for a long time until when I actually can't remember, but it was sometime in high school that I started using it. But before, even then, it was a source of embarrassment for me because it was my African name, and as a middle class kid in Kenya, removing yourself away from your Africanness was the thing. But then around high school, there was this resurgence of owning our African identity, although it was also an urban African identity. So it was speaking Swahili, speaking Sheng, listening to Swahili hip hop, listening to Swahili R&B, and so I started to have a relationship with this name, and then I moved here. And if some of you who might know me from when I started writing, I actually dropped Julia and I started using only Nekessa as my writing name. I would write Nekessa Opoti and I wouldn't use Julia. Now the thing is, Julia is actually my grandma's name, my paternal grandma. So the history, back to my fascination with colonialism and how it has actually embraced every aspect of our lives. For my grandmother's generation, to get an education, you had to get an English name, or a Christian name, basically. So Julia was the name that she got baptized. So she got into the church and was baptized and got an education. And I embody my grandma's legacy, so it's important. It was important for me not to lose that because that's part of my identity. And for another superficial reason, when Facebook became global, my high school mates would not recognize Nekessa. They might recognize my last name. I actually remember someone accusing me of pretending to be African because and this was someone that I went to high school with because, again, I had mentioned my biracialness. So we belong to this unclassified group of Kenyans. We actually are called derogatory names and while at the same time also exotified. So that navigation for me was very difficult to figure out, okay, these are my names. And the one name that I actually don't use at all and I have to figure out how I'm gonna get in is Zora. So Zora is my maternal great-grandmother who is actually alive, living in some British flats in England. And because she was, there was a time when Kenyan Indians were exiled because of the political climate. So a whole bunch of my relatives fled Kenya for the UK and for Canada. So I have cousins who look like me but are Indian. And who we share the same name because Zora was also the matriarch of the family, so a lot of us were called Zora, especially the first girls. And then on my paternal side, Nekessa, all my cousins, except one, all the first daughters, are all called Nekessa. They all spell it differently, some with a CH, some with one S. But I think I'm the one who uses it the most. I have a British cousin who is 10 years younger than me, so she's in that process of discovering it. And so her parents spelled it with one S, but she spells it with two S's because I do. And so she's living through my footsteps, I guess. So anyway, back to Zora. I pushed away as a kid. I didn't want to identify as biracial at all. So I covered that part of my identity. Even now, there are a lot of people who I know who don't know that about me. And it was a sense of wanting to fit in, but also a source of shame because Kenyan Indians are part of back up. So if you know anything basic about colonization, is what the British came in, took over Kenya, brought a group of Southeast Asians, so some of them were Bengali, some of them were Indian, to build the railway line as they did all over the British colonial legacy. And so that side of my family became upper class because of access to resources, because that's how the British worked. And so Kenyan Indians are not looked on favorably because they did become part of the owning class once the British left, and they're not the only ones. And so for me, being tied to that, you know, a lot of them are racist. Some of the reasons why my family even disintegrated was because of that. My parents had to elope because there was no way Indian woman was gonna marry this black Kenyan guy. So they met at university and they eloped. And so there's ugliness to that history. So for me to start talking about that part of my life, I had to share that ugliness. And so my whole life, I just didn't deal with it. I didn't talk about it. Moving away from home allowed me that space to start talking about it. And so Zora is something, I might use it, I don't know. Maybe I'm too old. Maybe I'll be a poet and I'll be Zora the poet. Or I don't know. So, and then my last name is Opoti. I do not have a relationship with my dad, but I have that name. My sister did drop Opoti for a while because she felt he had, you know, we call him the sperm donor. So because of that, she didn't want to own that name, but the thing is, we've established so much of ourselves using that name, so it's complicated. So I still use it, and I do have people from the Opoti side who made me who I am, and so I do not want to dismiss the whole family because of that, but it's a made-up name. Because the story goes, there's many versions, depending on which uncle or auntie is telling it. But great-grandpa was coming somewhere from, escaping something from West Africa, so from Ghana. And because actually, there's a lot of Ghanaians on Facebook who add me because they think I'm Ghanaian. Some of them are even Opoti, but you know. So they travel. The story is that he traveled, he was escaping something, he traveled and settled somewhere on the East African coast, East African protectorate at the time, so that was between Uganda and Kenya. And so then he had a family, and so the name he created was Opoti. The tribal group that lives there are Tessos and Luyas, and the Tesso version of that name is without an I at the end. So he claimed that tribe, and then he married a woman from the tribe next door. And so the two families have like really mixed cultural heritages, which I don't know most of them, but there's always conflict. Half the family thinks they're Tesso, the other family thinks they're Luya. And it depends on what side of the border. So once the British came and divided Kenya and Uganda, so depending on what side of the border they were existing on, they have those legacies. But I grew up in the city, so that complication doesn't exist for me. But anyway, so that's the story of my names. I have other names that I will not say right now. Some of them are kind of embarrassing. It's what my siblings call me, some of my aunts and uncles call me. But that's the complexity of my existence. So thank you for listening.